Okay guys, well it's been a few days and we're still waiting for that launch of EOS. It has been an interesting social experiment to say the least, and I thought it really important to share with you some of the machinations that went on. But first, I want to say a big thank you to everyone that has liked my previous videos and the large number of you that subscribed over the weekend. It was unexpected, so thank you. If you haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button and smash those likes. It's really motivating for me and helps these videos get noticed by Google. You must remember this is not financial advice, this is all tech and no talk about that sort of stuff, but enough of the usual warnings, let's get stuck into the detail. Right, Block 1 wrote the original EOS software, but it was not Block 1 that is launching the EOS mainnet. Block producer candidates do that as a team. A block producer is one of those 21 nodes that will validate the transactions on the EOS mainnet when live. Together they form the EOS mainnet launch group, or EMLG at this point. Since the launch countdown began, they have met every single day at 1 AM UTC on a video conference to vote whether to go live or not. Each block producer has their own way of confirming the EOS mainnet success for themselves, and therefore some commonalities exist. And I think we should walk through some of those. What has been achieved to date? Well, first, the GitHub repository has been created. This stores all of the code that the EOS block producers are basing their node installs on. Second, the token snapshot took place with 163,930 accounts captured and put ready for launch. Third, the candidate chains were created on which the ones are subject to testing. We kind of expected this split, as some were bound to prefer different configurations, but to be clear, there will be only one mainnet on launch, and that the majority will support that. The BPs are pretty aligned on this, and it will be obvious which one they actually go for. Fourth, there were some administration accounts that needed to be installed, such as EOS IO BPay, and there were some smart contracts that help run everything that needed to be checked so that they could be configured correctly. All done. Fifth, the security testing took place. This carried on for almost 20 hours and produced no major issues. We should say a little bit about the testing. There is a problem classification for testing for P0 to P4. P0 stop everything, P4 fix something in the future. There are two types of testing, system and user testing, and these are broken down into a few categories. The two user tests that we were most interested in were the ones where multisig and permissions were tested. These are really critical to people feeling safe and using the software. The system tests I was interested in were obviously the vulnerability auditing and the chain activation tests, but also the RAM market actions, which I'll come on to in a minute. There was one bug in the transaction process that was talked about in depth, but from the recognized experts in the virtual room, this wasn't enough of an issue to stop the go live. And talking about the expert witnesses, around 2 AM, 3 AM British summertime, Dan Larimer was called on to the video conference to provide some subject matter expertise for the block producer candidates. He recognised that there were no P0 or P1 issues, so couldn't see why not to go live. He then asked about the RAM issue the BPs were talking about an hour previously, and suggested a couple of solutions, one of which was to print some more EOS. I think we need to talk a little bit about what RAM is, just so this makes sense. Some of you may not know what RAM is in the context of EOS, so I'll quickly cover that. RAM is storage on EOS which dApps need to operate. You kind of reserve some space for your application to function. At the moment, RAM is plentiful because there are no dApps on the mainnet and only around 30 on launch. Prior to the dawn release of EOS, RAM was purchased at a set price, but it became obvious that as more apps came on board, more RAM would be required. So a market purchasing function was put in place where people could buy and sell RAM for a 1% fee. This incentivizes dApp developers to minimize their use of EOS resources. As a guide, Steam, Dan's old social network, keeps about 1 week's worth of content on that network. So there is not an infinite amount of RAM available on the main chain, so what I expect will happen is that RAM will hit a top market price on the main chain, and this will encourage side chains to come about. This is actually a really good part of the strategy of scalability for EOS. But back onto the story. As you can imagine, some block producers were a go and some were asking for a minor release update before go, but many were saying it's not required. There was speculation, but by some watchers, that the fact that this was the 8th of June, that this would affect Chinese block producers, because number 8 is such a lucky number over there. If you don't believe me, go and look at when the Beijing Olympics were started. Anyway, Dan chimed in and he said, good to go live and let the community test it. He then said the producers shouldn't be the ones making this crucial final no decision. A discussion was then started on the voting process, which took some time, and a vote was eventually taken from the block producer candidates, and it's a no go today on the 8th. Never mind, it's pushed back to probably tomorrow, if not Monday. But what do I think of the community launch? Well, watching some of the chats between the block producers, one of the things that has really struck me is the level of cooperation between everybody globally. I think the expectation was that the EOS launch would be absolute chaos, and rightly so, given that the developers essentially handed the code over to the block producers and said, "Go for it, lads." However, this did not happen, or at least it didn't happen on the big public channels. So what we saw was reasonably harmonious as any software release gets. I suppose I actually really appreciated the thought that went into the community launch. It was decentralized, which kind of chimed with my principles, but there were obviously some issues with getting objectives at play. I was surprised by Dan's statement that the block producers shouldn't be the ones making the decision, because it was obviously Block 1 that made this decision in the first place, that the BPs would do this. But I can understand it, because I would be frustrated after years of work. Well, a whole bunch of people, like 150 or so people, that I didn't know were making decisions about the stuff that I had painstakingly built. It was tense. However, everyone stuck to their guns about democracy, and democracy ran its course. I will say, however, that this call was more messy than the last. You can sense the general emotional atmosphere, which, given the attention EOS is getting, that's kind of understandable. I am dying to see what happens in the next call. In the meantime, obviously, EOS has had a small dip in the EOS USD at this point. During the launch process, it had a swing of around 90 cents, which is about 7% as expectations wavered. But let's see what happens tomorrow. Anyway, that's it for today. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Take care and have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.